Well, hello again. I'm Becca Burkhorn with Conversations with Becca, here with my friend Erin, who is the host of the podcast Personal Growth Sucks and is a life coach. And we are just continuing our conversation that we started about anxiety and some of the ways that I help people work through their anxiety. So Erin, I don't know if you want to bring us up to date on kind of what we've talked about.
Yeah, I can do that. So we've talked about how anxiety, there's really two parts of dealing with anxiety. There is dealing with the here and now, the immediate felt like panic of the example that we had talked about was going into a meeting at work and just feeling anxious, feeling like I kind of disappear, like my brain disappears. I don't know how to think or talk, and sometimes even walking away from that and then going, why didn't I say these three things, or why did this happen or that happen? And so kind of in those moments, there are ways to cope with that. We talked about breathing, we talked about mantras, we talked about some other things of like the five senses exercise. And then the second way is to really look at the deeper issue, what's happening here. Why am I feeling anxious when I go into these meetings? Is there a pattern? And is there some underlying thing that we can address? So the first two videos, we kind of talked about those big concepts, and then we went into detail about how to deal in the moment. And now we're going to talk about the more going deeper and going in depth and seeing, can we figure out more about the root cause of this?
Mm-hmm. Yes, which is the work that I really love to do. So yeah, I think when we talk about looking at some of the underlying root causes of anxiety, I think where I like to start with people is beginning to just notice how they feel the anxiety in their body and being able to tune into that. Noticing various levels of intensity, some even size, like it can feel huge or it can feel little, really tuning into the actual experience of that, and then becoming aware of messages. So I guess that would be thoughts that would be connected with that feeling, thoughts that go through the head, ways of maybe a message that comes from that anxious part. Maybe it's the way that the system, the attitude that other parts of our individual system has towards the anxiety, if that makes sense, because sometimes we can have the anxiety and then we might have a part of us that really judges that, or a part of us that's like, let's just get rid of the anxiety, and kind of gets, isn't very accepting of that this is the way that we are, that we are reacting, which isn't necessarily directly addressing the anxiety, but it certainly is a part of that, because it's a part of how we're holding energy towards ourselves. And that does impact whether or not we can really get access to what's going on with the anxiety, with those anxious thoughts, with those anxious feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which it reminds me of something that you and I have talked about, is the movie Inside Out. So if people are familiar with that, the Disney movie where you have this, you kind of get a look into this girl's brain, and you have these 5 different characters that are inside her brain, and they represent different emotions. So you have joy, anger, sadness, disgust, and fear, I think are the 5. And throughout the movie, you kind of see these different parts of herself interacting with each other and kind of fighting with each other, feeling in conflict with each other. Mm-hmm. And, that really is what is happening inside of our brains. And sometimes it can feel that way, like going into, like the example, going into a meeting, having a part of myself that's like, I just need to,
show up and be strong.
Yes. Why can't I just do this thing? And then another part that's going, yeah, but if you do that, it didn't go well last time, or here, Mm-hmm. And so then there's this anxiety that can come even from feeling like there's this conflict happening inside of me that I can't identify.
Right. Yeah. And so part of the work then too is to be able to begin to notice and identify these different parts, these different some of it might feel like pressure, the pressure to show up and be strong. And then the part that's scared, like, yeah, but if I do, like, is there going to be pushback from that? Am I going to get fired? Is my boss going to get angry? Am I going to get, demoted? And maybe not even something that serious, but just, I don't know. And it may not even be that there's a fear of what's going to happen actually in that meeting, but like, it can just feel terrifying to show up in the world. I want to show up, but it's so scary to show up. Will people like me? What will they think? How will they respond? Um, so, so that's a part of it, is just beginning to be aware of the different feelings that we have, different thoughts. These could all be described as parts of us. Like in that movie, there's a part that maybe gets angry. There's a part of us that feels sad. There's a part of us that's joyful. And in that movie, it's really interesting because Joy, the character Joy, had a really hard time letting some of the other emotions come to the forefront. She really tried to get rid of sadness and tried to get rid of some of these other feelings because they don't feel good. And part of the experience by the end of the movie, there was a beautiful moment where Joy accepted the sadness. And when they were able to coexist together, that is when the character felt at peace. And there's this beautiful scene where she's hugging her parents and they're accepting the sadness and the joy. And it's like this beautiful healing moment. And that is a part of the work, is really being able to identify the parts, and being able to understand them, to accept them, to see them. And simply being seen. I oftentimes compare it to, like, if someone has a bad day at work and, they're just really ruffled about something as they leave, maybe stressed out, maybe angry, whatever. And they call a friend and, can't believe my day at work, my boss, this and that. And they're venting and they're talking about it. If their friend would say to them, well, now, you really ought to have a good attitude and watch out how you're thinking about that. Like, that wouldn't feel good. And you'd hang up the phone and be like, can't believe she said that to me. But if the friend goes, oh my gosh, that was your day. I can't believe how your day was. No wonder you're feeling so upset. I would feel upset too. If they really can connect with and understand what your experience is, oh, you settle down and you feel calmer. And as you calm down, then you on your own can kind of go, oh yeah, I'm not going to go to work tomorrow and like chew my boss out, right? Like, I'm not going to do all these things that I wanted to do. And suddenly you see a path in front of you and you can kind of sort through, well, this is how I want to respond. But it's in that when your friend can make space to be present with you and understand your feelings, things calm down. And that very thing happens to us internally too, that we can pay attention to the different feelings that we're having, and parts can calm down and actually begin to trust that when we are present with our embodied self energy, the whole system can calm down and we can go into a meeting with a boss that maybe is intimidating without even needing to be anxious, because we're learning how to be present with ourselves. So
yeah. Well,
yeah.
and I was just, sorry, I hope I'm not interrupting your thought. Did you want to finish your thought, or?
No, I have another thought that I want to share, but I want you to interrupt it because I want to hear what you're thinking.
Yeah, well, there's so much I'm thinking, but one of the things I'm thinking is that this is why therapy is helpful, because there's not many spaces, I think, in our lives where we have relationships where people can truly hold that kind of space for us.
Right.
And so it feels like, at least for most of my life, walking around with people trying to like fix emotions, like, oh, you have this bad emotion. Right. Well, here's how you can fix it so that you don't feel that emotion.
Yes, just make it feel better.
Yeah, just make it feel better. And so then that sort of becomes the standard of like, oh, these emotions come up, I have to fix them, got to figure out how to deal with them and then make them go away. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking with a friend or maybe a family member, coworker, whatever, they have their own stuff they're dealing with.
Right.
And so it's hard for them to have objective space for you. And so then therapy becomes a place where you have time with another person who is completely objective. Mm-hmm. And you can share all these things and have space to just kind of notice, mm-hmm. space to accept things, and not constantly trying to fix something.
Right.
And that feels it, I think, maybe in our culture, that's really hard to see the value in that. But then once you start doing it, it's like, oh man, this is so helpful.
Yeah. It's counterintuitive. Well, two things. One is, as you're describing that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds so fun. I love that. I love sitting with people and making that space. So, which is why I love my job. But the other thing that I want to say is it does feel counterintuitive. In our culture, the standard way is get rid of emotion, shut it out, block it out so I can just keep moving forward and keep being productive and keep being whatever. Like we just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and go.
Mhm.
And it's kind of tricky because that works for a minute, but then at some point it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work to just force ourselves to keep going forward. And even if we can have a persona of success on the outside, oftentimes there's not success on the inside. It doesn't feel good. We don't feel satisfied. We don't feel congruent. We don't feel connected. We feel lonely. We feel afraid. We feel insecure, whatever it is that we're feeling. And it's not amazing. But it really is counterintuitive to turn around and look directly at those feelings and to make space for them and to actually listen to them. And yet that is the very thing that's going to help them calm down and be soothed and to be worked with in a way that they then aren't taking over our lives, that we actually can feel at peace. We can actually feel, and if we, I don't want to pretend like there's ever a time that we stop having feelings, because the reality is we are emotional beings and we experience our world through emotion if we're paying attention. But when we have a path through that and we have a way to be able to engage with those feelings and those parts of us, and we can trust that, like, oh, it's not going to take over, it's not going to eat me alive. I can feel this and I can be with it within myself. I can bring it to another human. All of a sudden, the path forward becomes manageable, doable, even rewarding. There's a lot more peace in that. And so what feels so counterintuitive actually is, by, the looking at our feelings and making space for that and paying attention to that, actually is the thing that gives us a satisfying path forward.
Yeah. And I think as you're talking about that, there is so much anxiety that comes from trying to manage this internal thing that's happening,
Oh,
or
it's exhausting.
even times where it's like, oh, okay, they think I'm competent. Okay, how did that
Well, I
happen?
gotta
How did I
keep
make
this
that
up.
happen? I gotta like figure out how to keep moving
Yeah.
with that, which I think happens a lot in the workplace,
Yes.
versus just being able to have this internal confidence of just, I can accept all the things. I don't have to manage all of the stuff that's happening
Right.
internally in order to appear a certain way. There's
Yes.
so much stress and anxiety there.
There is. And what that makes me think of what you just said is kind of the practice of um, accepting the good and the bad, being able to hold all of that, all of my feelings, all the strengths, weaknesses. There's so much there of being able to hold the reality of all of that and know that I'm okay.
Yeah, and that does take a lot of times someone to help us through it, because the internal judge can be so harsh and it can be really disorienting.
Yes.
And actually we were just talking about this before we hit record here,
Mhm.
of work that we're doing in our own lives, where it's like, oh, I know that I don't want it to be this way anymore,
Right.
but I'm not practiced enough to know how to make it this way. So I'm kind of in this in between.
Yes. How do I make
Which
sense
is
of
terrible.
this?
And
Yes.
that's where we need other people to help give us objective perspective, or help us just stay connected to the work that we're doing and that we're okay here. Because doing it on your own can just make you feel like split in all these ways.
Right. Yeah. And to make sense of it, like, and I have my own individual therapist who I meet with, and um, it is exactly what you said. I don't know what I would do without that, because it is a place that I know how to do my own work, but when I meet with my therapist, the depth of work and the progress that can be made and the the ability, the place that I can get to and feeling grounded and connected back to myself, the insight I can gain into my own feelings and the parts and the things that are coming up and the beliefs that I have. I get so much more grounded back to where I need to be. And then I can move, right? And so there is something about being able to meet with someone else that who can hold space and bring their self energy to really help navigate these shifts that we have to make away from, like you said, it is recognizing, oh, I can see that old way isn't the way I want to live. That's not working for me. And I actually can see the new way, but I'm not there yet. And so how do I get there? What's the path forward? If we knew the path forward on our own, we would already do it. And so the fact that we're not there points to like, yeah, it can be helpful to have someone show us the way, lead us through the forest in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I feel like we could, well, and I know the two of us, we could talk for hours about
Yes.
all these things, go down all the paths, talk about all the things. But for the sake of being a little bit concise here,
yes.
we can wrap this up, and maybe
Yes.
we will come back and have some other topics to talk about. But I think that this does show that you can help people address both of these issues of anxiety, where you get that immediate, here's help, kind of like going into triage or something, or if you
or let's at least know how to tread water. We're not going to drown here.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I like that analogy, treading water. And so you can help people get to a place where they don't feel like they're drowning. But then that's not a great place to stay either. Like, let's help you figure out how to get to shore and be able to really have some stability. And that comes in this, like, digging a little bit deeper, being curious, holding space for things, being able to accept things. And that really is the work that you love doing.
Oh my gosh, just hearing you talk about it, I'm like so excited. Like,
let's get started.
It's me.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
well, this has been fun and hopefully helpful for people to get to know you better and understand your approach to therapy and get excited about potentially working with you.
Yeah, thanks for having these conversations with me. It's been fun.
Yeah, my pleasure.